The football war. When sports fans literally went to war for 4 days. What if I told you that in 1969, two countries literally went to war over a soccer match, not just sports riots, an actual war with fighter planes bombing cities, tanks crossing borders, and 3,000 people dying? His is the story of how El Salvador and Honduras tried to kill each other for 100 hours because of a football. And here's the most absurd part. It had absolutely nothing to do with soccer. Chapter 1. The Powder Keg. June 1969. Central America was a powder keg waiting to explode. El Salvador was one of the most densely populated countries in the world, while Honduras had more land but was economically poorer. The problem was that 300,000 Salvadoran peasants had migrated to Honduras looking for work and farmland. That's 20% of Honduras's entire population. Imagine if 20% of your country's population consisted of immigrants from your neighbor. You can sense the tension. The Honduran government began blaming immigrants for their economic crisis. They're stealing our jobs. They're taking our land. Sound familiar? From early 1969, Honduras started confiscating property from Salvadoran immigrants and deporting them. And then, conveniently, World Cup qualifiers began. Soccer in Central America is like religion. People were literally prepared to die for their national team. Chapter 2. First match. Nightmare in Tegucigalpa. June 8, 1969, Tegucigalpa, Honduras's capital. The first World Cup qualifier, Honduras home game. The night before the match, Honduran fans gathered around the hotel where the Salvadoran team was staying. They spent the entire night beating drums, shouting, and throwing stones to keep the Salvadoran players awake. This wasn't just home fan support, it was systematic psychological warfare. On game day, the Salvadoran players took the field having barely slept. The result? Honduras won 1-0, but the real tragedy happened not in the stadium, but in front of TV screens. In El Salvador, 18-year-old Amelia Bolaños, watching her team lose, couldn't bear the defeat and shot herself with her father's pistol. Salvadoran media portrayed this girl as a national martyr, and her funeral became a day of national mourning. Tens of thousands took to the streets, singing the national anthem and chanting, "Revenge on Honduras." An entire country was consumed with rage over a single soccer match. Chapter 3. Second match. Revenge in San Salvador. June 15, 1969, a week later. The second leg in El Salvador's capital, San Salvador. This time, it was El Salvador's home game. Salvadorans prepared their revenge. From the moment the Honduran team arrived at the airport, protests began. Thousands gathered around their hotel, screaming and setting off fireworks all night. They even threw rotten eggs and dead rats at the Honduran players' room windows. Before the match, when both national anthems were played, Salvadoran spectators booed the Honduran anthem and burned Honduran flags, public desecration of national symbols. El Salvador won the match 3-0. But what happened after was worse. As Honduran fans drove toward the border, Salvadoran mobs attacked vehicles with Honduran license plates. 2 people died and dozens were injured. Both countries' media began calling each other savages and murderers. A soccer match had transformed into nationalist frenzy. Chapter 4. Third match and diplomatic breakdown. June 27, 1969. The decisive match in Mexico City, neutral territory. But it was already too late. Even before the match, violence against each other's nationals escalated in both countries. In Honduras, Salvadoran immigrants were lynched and their property looted. In El Salvador, Hondurans were deported or beaten. El Salvador won 3-2 and qualified for the World Cup, but relations between the two countries had passed the point of no return. Immediately after the match, El Salvador announced it was severing diplomatic relations with Honduras. The reason? Honduras's systematic massacre and human rights violations. What began as a soccer conflict had become political confrontation, disguised as humanitarian crisis. Chapter 5. Declaration of War. 100 Hours of Madness begins. July 14, 1969, 5 p.m. The Salvadoran Air Force began bombing Honduran airports. The soccer war had begun. El Salvador's strategy was simple: defeat Honduras quickly and finish before the international community could intervene. They thought they could occupy the Honduran capital within 3 days. On the first day, Salvadoran forces crossed the border and advanced deep into Honduran territory. The Honduran military was weaker than expected, and El Salvador's attack seemed successful. But there was a problem. El Salvador was a small country without resources for prolonged warfare. Honduras was larger but poorer, with weaker military forces. Ultimately, neither country was prepared for a real war. Chapter 6: The World's Strangest Air War. The Soccer War's air battles were like a comedy movie. Both countries lacked proper fighter aircraft, so they attached bombs to civilian planes to use as fighters. Salvadoran pilot Fernando Solis climbed into his small Cessna 180 with a pistol and shot down a Honduran fighter. This is probably the only case in aviation history of an aircraft being shot down by pistol. Honduras was more creative. They conducted bombing runs by hand-throwing bombs from civilian DC-6 passenger planes. While the pilot flew the plane, crew members opened windows and dropped bombs below. The accuracy was, well, use your imagination. The most ridiculous incident was when a Honduran pilot, trying to bomb a Salvadoran airbase, got lost and bombed El Salvador's main shopping mall instead. The first shopping mall bombing in military history. Chapter 7: International Intervention and Ceasefire. 4 days after the war began, the international community started moving. The United States and the OAS, Organization of American States, immediately demanded a ceasefire. Why did they intervene so quickly? First, this war could have spread throughout Central America. Second, during the Cold War, America didn't want instability in its backyard. Third, frankly, it looked too stupid. Headlines reading "War over Soccer" didn't help American foreign policy. July 18, 1969, exactly 100 hours after the war began, a ceasefire was achieved. Salvadoran forces began withdrawing from Honduras, and both countries started discussing peace agreements under OAS mediation. Chapter 8: The Real Causes of War. The FI. Now let's tell the truth. The soccer war didn't start because of soccer. Soccer was just the trigger. Looking at the actual causes, economic causes, El Salvador suffered from overpopulation and land shortage, while Honduras blamed immigrants for its economic crisis. The 300,000 Salvadoran immigrants were perfect scapegoats for Honduran politicians. Political causes. Both countries had military dictatorships trying to divert domestic dissatisfaction through external conflict. Nothing unites people like an external enemy. Social causes. Deep-rooted nationalism in Central America combined with fanatic love for soccer. Soccer wasn't just a sport. It was a symbol of national pride. The soccer matches simply lit a match to conflicts that were already boiling. Chapter 9: Results and Aftermath. The 100-hour war killed approximately 3,000 people, mostly civilians. Tens of thousands of Salvadoran immigrants were expelled from Honduras, and both countries' economies suffered massive damage. The most ironic result was that El Salvador completely failed at the World Cup. In the 1970 Mexico World Cup, El Salvador lost all 3 matches and scored no goals, being eliminated early. The World Cup qualification they fought a war for ended in complete failure. Relations between the two countries weren't normalized until 1980. Diplomatic ties remained severed for 11 years. During this period, Central America was swept by larger civil wars, and the soccer war became the starting point of regional instability. Lessons from the soccer war. First, sports can never be separated from politics, especially in matches where national pride is at stake. This case shows how a single soccer ball can trigger international war. Second, politicians prefer creating external enemies instead of solving domestic problems. Neither Honduras's economic problems nor El Salvador's overpopulation were solved by war. Third, the power of media is frightening. As both countries' media fueled nationalist frenzy, a soccer match developed into actual warfare. This shows how dangerous fake news and biased reporting can be. Finally, humans sometimes kill each other for really stupid reasons. 3,000 people dying over 100 hours because of soccer is one of the most absurd wars in human history. Next episode, the Pig War, when the United States and Britain nearly triggered a world war over a single pig and stood off for 12 years. How did one piece of bacon almost push two empires to the brink of war, and why did it end without a single shot being fired? Stay tuned to find out.